Alright, so we're gonna loosen these three 13mm bolts. Okay, so we're not gonna remove them completely, but we're just gonna loosen them. And with these bolts loosened, our camshaft gear should be able to move. Okay, so the sprocket should move because these holes over here are elongated, and these will help us install the serpentine belt easily. Okay, so you will notice that the sprocket is moving, but the cam, so this metal piece over here is not moving. Look at this. So this is moving, but this trigger point over here is not moving. So this is attached to the camshaft, and this one bolts onto the camshaft. Okay, the sprocket bolts onto the camshaft. Okay, so that's loose, so we're good. So now let's remove the water pump. So now we're gonna remove the first bolt of the water pump. So here comes the first water pump bolt. So now we're gonna undo the second one. Alright, so we got all the bolts for the water pump removed. So now I'm gonna get a pry bar so we can pry the water pump out of there. So we're gonna pry. So I do have a drain container under the vehicle, because when the water pump comes out, it's gonna leak coolant. So right there. So now we're just gonna rock the water pump back and forth. So here comes our old water pump. Okay. As you can see, it has 3 holes. Okay. So it only has 3 bolts that hold it in place. Okay, so now I'm gonna get this water pump out of the way. So we got the water pump removed. So what's the next thing? The next thing is removing this timing belt tensioner. So we're gonna remove the nut first, and then the tensioner is just gonna slide out. So here it is. Here comes the tensioner, and then this little lever over here has a hole up here where it goes into. I don't know if you will be able to see, but just below this sprocket there's a little hole where this hooks onto. And then when we install the new one, we have to make sure that the new one, so this lever goes in the hole over here. Okay, it kind of hooks onto the plastic cover that's over here. Okay, so we're gonna put this one over here also. So all these components will be replaced: the water pump, the timing belt tensioner, and the timing belt will also be replaced. So we're gonna let coolant drain out of the block, and then I am going to clean the water pump surface. So we're gonna clean this entire surface really well, and then we will install the new water pump. So I'm gonna clean this surface off camera. Okay, so I'm gonna clean this surface here very well. So I will clean it off camera, and then I will bring you guys back up so we can install the new water pump. So here is our timing belt kit. So this is the part number. Okay, so in this box we have the timing belt, the water pump, and the timing belt tensioner and the roller. So this is the water pump, okay, and that's the O-ring for the water pump. So that's the gasket for it. I'm gonna have to install that gasket on the new water pump. And then this over here is the tensioner for the timing belt. So that's the new tensioner right there. Okay, so this is the new tensioner that we're gonna install. As you can see, it's locked with the key, so that's good. Once we put it on, we're gonna remove the key, and then we're gonna tension the belt with this. Okay, so this is the roller. Okay, so we got everything brand new, and this over here is the belt. Okay, the belt is on the bottom. All right, so I'm gonna prep the water pump, and then I'll bring you guys back up so we can install the water pump. After we install the water pump, then we will install the tensioner and the belt and then the roller. Okay, so at this point everything we're gonna do is gonna be the reverse process of the removal process. Okay, so I'm gonna get the water pump ready, and then I'll bring you guys back up. So I got the water pump prepped, so now we're gonna install it. So here comes our new water pump. So I got this bolt over here started, so now we're gonna put the bolt up here on. Alright, so I got all 3 bolts for the water pump started. So now we're gonna get them snug. I'm just gonna snug them, and then we will use a torque wrench to torque this bolt. So the torque spec for the water pump bolt is 15 Newton meters. So I'm gonna grab a torque wrench. My torque wrench is in inch pound, so we're gonna convert 15 Newton meters into inch pound. So I will get a torque wrench so we can torque these bolts. I converted 15 Newton meters into inch pounds, so 15 Newton meters equals 133 inch pounds. So that's what we're gonna use to torque these bolts. So right there. So that's torqued. So I hope you heard the click. So that's good. So now let's do the last one. So that's good. I hope you heard that. Okay, good. So all the water pump bolts are torqued down. So now we're gonna bring our timing belt tensioner so we can install it. After we install the timing belt tensioner, and then we're gonna install the timing belt. So now the next component we're gonna install is gonna be the timing belt tensioner. Okay, so I'm gonna show you a little hole over here. I hope you can see it. Let me zoom you guys in this area here so you can see. Oops, my flashlight is dying. So right in here there is a little hole. So right there, okay, where you see this little hole over here, this. So that's where the lever on the tensioner is gonna go. So this lever over here is gonna go in that hole. Okay, this is gonna go in there. Okay, so when you install this, you install the tensioner, you have to make sure that this lever goes in this hole over here. Okay, so now let's install the timing belt tensioner. So right there. Okay, so it's right there on the hole. As you can see, this metal blade over here on the back of the tensioner is not supposed to move. So let's say you see how it's moving. Okay, so don't do it this way. You have to make sure that this hook goes into this hole. Okay, as you can see right now, it's no longer moving. Okay, so that's good. So now we're gonna install the the nut for the tensioner. Alright, so the nut is installed, so now we're gonna install the timing belt. So before we install the timing belt, we have to make sure that everything looks good. As you can see, our tool that's locking the crank gear is in place. Our water pump is installed. We got the timing belt tensioner installed. Our cam sprocket is loose and our camshaft is locked, so we're good to go. So now let's bring our new timing belt here so we can install it. Here comes our new timing belt. So I'm going to install it. So we're gonna make sure that the timing belt goes on the crankshaft gear first. Okay. And then we're gonna go over here on the water pump and then up here. As you can see, the timing belt is installed. So now we're gonna put some tension on the timing belt. So we got the tension on the timing belt, but before we tighten the nut of the tensioner, we're gonna have to install the timing belt roller first. Okay, so the roller that goes over here, so we need to install that. Okay, so that's gonna go right there. We're gonna put the nut on. All right, so now we're gonna tension our timing belt before we tighten the nut of the timing belt tensioner. Alright, so I'm going to hold the ratchet up here while I'm tightening the nut of the tensioner. All right, so the timing belt is installed. Everything is tight. So now I'm gonna get a torque wrench so we can torque the nut for the timing belt tensioner and the nut for the timing belt roller. Okay, the torque spec for the nut of the timing belt tensioner is 20 Newton meters. Now we're gonna convert that into inch pound. The conversion is 177 inch pound. Okay, so we're gonna torque this down right there. I hope you guys heard that. So that's good. That's torqued. So now we're gonna torque the roller of the timing belt. So the roller of the timing belt is gonna be torqued down to 20 Newton meters, which is also gonna be 177 inch pound. So right there. So the roller is tightened and the timing belt tensioner is also tightened, so everything is torqued down. So now we're gonna torque down these 3 bolts for the camshaft sprocket, and the torque spec for these camshaft sprocket bolts is 25 Newton meters. 25 Newton meters converted to inch pound equals to 222 inch pound. So we're gonna tighten these 3. So I hope you can hear the torque wrench click. So right there. All right, so these bolts over here are torqued down to 25 Newton meters, and then this nut over here is torqued down to 20 Newton meters, and that one over there is also torqued to 20 Newton meters. Okay, so at this point we're gonna remove our locking tools. So we're gonna remove this pin over here. We're also gonna remove the tool that we put down there at the crank gear, and then we're gonna spin the engine 2 complete revolutions. After spinning the engine 2 complete revolutions, everything should line up. We should be able to insert this pin again, and the tool down there should also lock. Okay, so if everything falls in place, then we're good to go. At that point we're gonna put everything back together, and then we will start this engine. Okay, so now I'm gonna remove these tools so we can spin the engine. So now I'm going to remove the tool that we put up here. So this tool is removed. So now let's go down to the crankshaft so we can remove the tool that we put on the crank gear. So as you can see, we are down here at the crankshaft gear. So our marks are lined up. So this mark over here and then this one. So we're good. So now I'm going to remove this tool. Okay, so we're gonna remove this. We're going to spin the crankshaft. Okay, we're gonna make 2 complete revolutions, and then we will double check our timing marks. So after 2 complete revolutions, if everything is good, all our marks should fall in place. So now let's spin this. So this is the first revolution. So we're gonna do the second one. So as you can see, this is now our second revolution. Our mark is lined up. So now let's insert our tool and see if it's gonna go in. So right there, as you can see, our tool was able to slide in. So now let's double check our mark. So right there, guys. So as you can see, this mark over here is lined up, and so is this one. Okay, so we're good to go. So now let's go up to the camshaft and double check our mark at the camshaft. So we are up here at the camshaft sprocket. I mean, I can already tell that everything looks good up here because this arrow over here, I don't know if you can see it, the arrow back there is lined up. So that's already a good sign. So now we're gonna insert the tool here, right there. So as you can see, the tool went in. So our engine is in time, okay? Everything is good. So up here, we're good. Our tool goes in. So if we come down here at the crank gear, look at what we got. Okay, so the tool over there is lined up. Our marks down here are lined up. And up here at the cam, the pin goes in. Okay, so this engine is in time. The engine is timed properly. So we're gonna put everything back together. After we put everything back together, this engine should start. Okay, that ball comes out, so I'm gonna have to pry this out. Okay, so this is good. Our engine is timed. So at this point, we're gonna start putting everything back together. Okay, so at this point, it's gonna be the reverse process of the removal process. Okay, so let me get my timing tool that's down here. Okay, so we're gonna remove that. So we're done with this. Now let's go back up here so we can start putting everything back together. Okay, so now the next step is gonna be installing the timing belt center cover. Okay, so now let's do that. All right, so now I'm gonna install the bottom cover. So I got the bolt for the bottom cover started. It's always good to get the bolt of the bottom cover started before tightening this center bolt, because if everything is not lined up, if you tighten this one, the holes on the bottom cover will not be centered, which will make it hard to install the bottom cover. So now we're going to tighten this center bolt. All right, so the center bolt is tightened. So now the next step is going to be installing the motor mount bracket. So now let's do that. So the motor mount bracket is on. So now I'm gonna put the bolt for the motor mount bracket. Right, so now I'm gonna lower the engine a little bit so I can install the bottom bolt for the motor mount. So I got the bottom bolt of the motor mount bracket on. So now I'm gonna jack up the motor a little bit so we can install the upper cover of the timing belt, and then we will install the motor mount. Alright, so the cover, the timing belt cover can be installed. Alright, so the upper cover of the timing belt is installed. So now let's install the motor mount. So here comes our motor mount. Alright, so now I'm gonna tighten the bolt for the motor mount. So I'm gonna tighten these two 16mm bolts first. So the engine mount is installed and the bolts are tightened. So I'm gonna bring you guys over here so I can show you what I just did. So I tightened this bolt and then this one and then these two 18mm bolts. So the engine mount is reinstalled. So now I'm gonna install the fuel filter bracket, and I'm also gonna remove the jack that I put under the oil pan, and I will also install the serpentine belt tensioner. So now let's do that. So now we're gonna install the fuel filter bracket. So here is what I have installed. So I installed this bracket. This is where the fuel filter sits. So this is the fuel filter mounting bracket. So it goes all the way back there. Okay. So now we're gonna remove this shop towel that I put over here. Okay. So we can install the inlet, the air inlet tube. Okay, so we're gonna push the air inlet tube down there, and then we will install the fuel filter. All right, so the air inlet tube is installed. So now we're gonna install the fuel filter. Alright, so we tightened the bolt for the fuel filter bracket. So now I'm gonna reconnect these fuel lines. All right, so we are making progress. Okay, so we are almost done up here. So the next step now is installing the coolant reservoir. Alright, so now the next step is installing the serpentine belt tensioner. So the bolts for the serpentine belt tensioner are tightened. So now I'm gonna raise up the vehicle so we can install the crankshaft pulley. After we install the crankshaft pulley, we're gonna install the serpentine belt. Here is how everything looks over here. So things are coming back together slowly and surely. So now let's raise the vehicle up so we can install the crank pulley. So now I'm gonna tighten these 4 10mm bolts for the bottom timing belt cover. So everything up here is tightened. Okay, so I got all these bolts tightened. So now we're gonna install the crankshaft pulley. So here comes the crank pulley. All right, so the crank pulley is gonna sit like that. Alright, so we've tightened the bolt for the crankshaft pulley. So now we're gonna install the serpentine belt. I wanna install the serpentine belt first before I install this tube. So let's lower the vehicle, install the serpentine belt, and then we will come back here and install this tube, and then we're gonna install the wheel well cover. And then we're gonna put the tire back on, and then we will start the engine. So now let's do that. So the belt is gonna go down over here. I can't really show you guys what I'm doing because there's no room over here. It's so tight. Alright, so I got the serpentine belt installed. You probably can't really see. I'm gonna show it to you from this side. So the serpentine belt is installed. So now I'm gonna lift up the vehicle so we can install the cover over here on the wheel well. So as you can see up there, our serpentine belt is installed. Okay, so now let's install the cover that covers this area. This plastic cover is gonna be installed first. Alright, so this plastic cover is installed. So now we're gonna install this inlet tube. So we're gonna install this side first. Alright, so that's good. So now we're gonna install this nut over here. Alright, so we're good to go. Alright, so now I'm gonna start reinstalling all the bolts for this cover. So all the bolts for this plastic cover will now be reinstalled. Alright, so this cover is installed, so now we're gonna install the tire. Alright, so I got the tire reinstalled. So now let's lower the vehicle and check everything in the engine bay. If everything is back together, we're gonna reconnect the battery and then start the engine. So now let's do that. So now I'm going to reconnect this coolant hose that goes over here on the coolant reservoir. Alright, so I'm gonna reconnect this electrical connector here. Down to the last piece that has to be installed. It's this one over here. We're gonna push this right there. Now we're gonna push this. So as you can see, everything is back together. Okay, so I'm gonna bring you guys over here. I'm gonna show you how everything looks, and then I'm gonna reconnect the battery. And after that, I'm gonna go inside the vehicle and start the engine. So as you can see, everything is back together. Okay, so all the connectors are reconnected. Okay, and our coolant reservoir is empty, so we're gonna have to put coolant inside the coolant reservoir. Okay, but we can actually start it for like only a minute or so. It's not gonna hurt anything. Okay, so everything looks good, everything is back together. So now let's reconnect the battery. So I'm gonna check the oil level just in case. Let's make sure we have enough oil in this engine. Actually, it doesn't have enough oil. So the oil level is low. I don't know if you'll be able to tell. So we're gonna have to add some oil in here. Alright, so we have enough oil in the engine now. Okay. Alright, so actually I said I was gonna start the engine before filling the cooling system, but I'm gonna go ahead and fill the cooling system right now before I start the engine. Alright, so now I'm gonna go inside the vehicle and start the engine. Alright guys, so as you guys can hear, the engine is running. The engine sounds good. I'm gonna take you guys inside the vehicle so you can see that there are no lights on the dash, and then we will wrap up this video. So it's getting late here. I'm not gonna take it for a test drive. I'll take it for a test drive tomorrow. So I'm gonna take you guys inside the vehicle so I can show you the dash, and then we will wrap up this video. Alright, so we are inside the vehicle. Okay, so as you can see, there are no lights on the dash. So now I'm going to turn off the engine so we can wrap up this video. So I'm gonna reinstall the engine cover. I'm gonna start it one more time before we wrap up this video. Alright guys, so I'm gonna leave it right over here. This is how you remove and replace a timing belt and a water pump on this 2006 VW Beetle with a 1.9 liter. I hope you like the video. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't like the video, give it a thumb down. But if you do, you gotta tell me why so we can make better videos in the future. If this is your first time here, subscribe to the channel. Ring the bell so you can get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have any comments, questions, criticism, leave them in the comment box. Thanks for watching. See you next time.